Alright everyone, today we're going to be working on a Chevy K2500 on the channel here. We're doing upper and lower ball joints and a hub and bearing on the driver's side. So I'm going to try to break this apart into a few different videos so we can just concentrate on the repair you're actually doing. But we are doing a bunch of front end work on this vehicle, so it should be interesting, it should be useful. Stay tuned. Now the first thing you need to do is jack up the side you're working on, and you want to jack it on a solid frame point and then lay it down on a jack stand like so onto the frame. So we're about to let it down onto there. We have it jacked up on the plow mount up here, but usually you would jack it on the frame over here, something solid like that where it can handle all the weight. Once you get the tire off of there, you can set it down onto the jack stand so it's safe for working. Now if you don't have an impact tool to get your lug nuts off of here, what you want to do is break torque on them before you ever take the wheel off of the ground. Just loosen them, break torque, and then once the vehicle is jacked up, we can actually just spin them off very easily. Me, I have an impact, so we're just going to do it that way now that's off the ground. Okay, so here we go. On this particular vehicle, it's 13/16. Just size it up on there. Now your wheel itself might be stuck on there, so what you can do is just hit it back and forth, or top and bottom until it breaks free. Alternatively, you can hit it from the back side with your feet, or a plastic like mallet, like a dead blow, that has about 5 pounds of weight to it. This one, obviously, it's coming right off, so that's nice. Once you have the wheel off of here, you want to go after anything you're going to take off, any kind of nuts or bolts back in here, and start spraying them with rust penetrant and get them soaking. And then we'll brush them off, we'll spray them again, and then we'll attempt to start taking pieces off of here. Now the product I like to use is the Mopar rust penetrant. It's really, really good stuff. The other option is PB Blaster, and then there's a couple other brands out there that are even more expensive than that, but this one is my go-to for everyday rust penetrant. Like I said, just spray the exposed threads, and if they're really rusty, clean them off, because if you don't, when you take this nut off of here, it's just going to cross-thread the whole axle you just took it off of when the problem wasn't there before. So just go through, spray everything that you're going to be taking apart for this job, and get it soaked. Now in order to break torque on this, you'll notice that we're trying to break torque on it. It's a couple hundred foot-pounds, and it just keeps on spinning like it should. What you can do is have someone put their foot in the brake, and that'll clamp down. The caliper will clamp down and hold it for you. Or if you're all alone, you can take a flathead screwdriver like this that's bulky and beefy. Put it in the fins of the rotor, and then it goes to right there, you see? And it'll hold it for you. Then you can proceed with breaking torque on there. And it'll look something like this. A nice cheater bar on here. And you can start loosening it. Alright, the next thing we're going to be taking off is the brake caliper. Get that hung and out of the way. So we're going to turn the wheel to the right, so we have full access to the caliper bolts. Alright, for the caliper, it takes 3/8 inverted hex on there like this. You can see it. So he's put it in the back there, and we'll get the slide pins out of here. Okay, the caliper slide pins are loose. They're kind of caged in there, so they're not going to come out all the way, but they're definitely loose from the knuckle here. What you need to do now is flip the caliper up and away, and it's a good idea to compress the piston in here just a little bit so it's a little bit loose to get past the rust ridge on here. So you just take a regular C-clamp, something like this, get it out far enough, and you just compress it just enough, and it'll help tremendously with separating all of this. It'll be all loose then. Now if you have a wood clamp at home, that's what I usually use when I'm at home at the shop, and that is even faster. You just want to go in just a little bit, and it'll be loose. Get this thing off of here. You see how loose it is already? It's ready to fall off, literally. And that's a little trick for getting these off. And then just wobble them off of here at that point. Make sure your bolts are fully out. And kind of wiggle it off of there. Put it up top here. Do not let the caliper hang. It's never a good idea. So on this side over here, there's a tie rod end nut. You want to take that off of there. We're going to knock that through. That's the last component that's holding us from spinning side to side on here. So we'll turn this back like this. Okay. So we've accessed the tie rod end. You can see it right there now. And start getting that off of there. And the nut on here is an 18 millimeter. Okay, now there's a few different ways of taking apart separating the tie rod end from the knuckle. You can either wrap on the side here and it should come loose, or you can put this bolt back on here, the nut, and tap it right on through. If you use a pickle fork or something like that, it's going to split the boot. Now on ours it doesn't matter because we're changing the outer tie rod end, but on yours you may not be. So I'm going to show you the two different methods and we'll see what works best here. Usually tapping the side, it comes right out, depending on how rusty it is. Okay, so if you do the nut method, what you want to do is make sure it's just about flush so we're not caving in the nut and ruining that also. And then you just do some good taps through and you'll notice it comes loose then. Alright, next thing we're going to do is take this bracket off that supports the brake hose here. It's a 13 mil. And hopefully yours does not break. Oh, this one didn't. It's kind of hard to get to it, rust penetrant. Now the whole caliper is loose and the hose. At this point you want to either put it over here like on a milk crate and support it, or hang it from the frame somewhere so it's not hanging on the hose itself. And we'll get that out of the way so it doesn't fall when we're trying to take this off. Alright, follow your ABS cable up and we're going to disconnect it. There's another clip up here on top of the frame here with this boxed in for the control arm. You'll see it, just follow it. And then you keep following it over to here and you'll see it. It's where it ties in to the main harness. We'll get that off of there so it's free, so when we start dropping the whole knuckle assembly out of here, it's not attached. Alright, on the bottom side here for the lower ball joint, it's going to be really rusty from being exposed all the time, and your cotter pin that goes through here most likely be disintegrated, or you won't be able to get tapped through there. So just clip the ends of it so it's flush so you can fit a socket on here, like so. You can still fit it all the way on there, and either use force and a breaker bar or a 1/2 inch impact, and it'll actually slice that cotter pin right off of there still. So it's not the end of the world if you cannot get the cotter pin out of there. And most of the time it still doesn't ruin the threads or anything like that. This one's definitely coming right off, so that's nice. Okay, so when we're actually separating the knuckle from the control arms, it's going to pop and it's going to drop. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the nut back onto here. Couple threads, okay, and that way when it does drop, it doesn't drop on our toes. Couple threads like that, nice and loose, and it'll come right off later on once this whole knuckle falls down. Alright, now same thing on this side. We're just going to tap on the side of the knuckle. It's going to loosen, it's going to vibrate a little bit, and we should be able to either hit up on the arm itself or just tap it and it'll come up and out of there. We're going to separate the top part first and then lower part second once we have access. So let's see if we can do this here. Safety glasses. There we go. Okay, same thing. Make sure that nut is still on the lower ball joint, like so. You can see it on there. And we're just going to tap the side of it here. It should go down eventually here. You can see right there with some hammering, it's starting to come out and separate. You see how low it is? It's just going to take a little bit of time, but it's already basically loose from the tapered joint on the ball joint there already. So that nut's going to hold it for us so it doesn't fall on us. Alright, it's definitely loose. The nut's still holding the whole thing up. So pick it up and be ready. It's gonna have a lot of weight to it. Something like that. It's a little tricky separating from the CV and the lower at the same time. Just a little wiggling, and this whole thing will come out. Okay, now getting these ball joints out of here, they're just pressed in this way until they bottom out and they're nice and flush. So it's kind of tight underneath here. If you use a receiver cup or anything like that with a ball joint press and C-frame. So the old trick is to get the axle up and out of the way like this, past the links over here and stuff like that, and stabilizer bar. Wire tie it or bungee it out of the way so we're free and clear to sit here and strike down on the ball joint itself, and that's the old trick to get these out. And we'll use the C-frame press over here to put them back in properly. Just kind of whack it, and eventually it'll start coming. Now once it starts moving like that, it's pretty much going to come right out. It'll start moving pretty rapid. So at this point you don't need to hit it as hard. Start concentrating so you don't ruin the actual hole here. We can just tap on with either this gently, or you can use a 1-pounder. Just be mindful of the outside edge here. And you can just feel it when you hit it, it's giving instead of being just solid. And it's that easy to get them out. Now once it's out of there, whether you damaged it or not, what you want to do is clean the bore of it. What I use is a semi-curved file like this, and it'll match the curvature of the bore here. Get dirt, rust, all that out of there. And I just top of it like this. Really clean it up, top and bottom, especially in the bottom here, because the flange of it, the ball joint's gonna have to sit flush against that to be fully inserted. And it only takes a few seconds. And then we'll use a rag and some brake clean. Let me get a new rag here. You can also use, a wire brush up top here. But for the bore, you want to use that file and clean it out properly. But you can see, hopefully, by the ring inside of the shiny part, that's where it's actually pressed into there, and it's only halfway through there. So it shouldn't be too bad just to hammer them out of there and be done with it. Look at that. Like new, ready to go back together. Now your new ball joint, you want to take the boot off of there, comes with it, because it's so tight underneath there. When we press it, we're going to put the receiver cup on here, kind of like this. And if you leave the boot on there, you're going to tear the boot up on there. So let's take the boot off, it should come right off of there. We'll press it in, and then we'll worry about putting the boot back on later on. It just snaps back onto there. Now going back in, it's going to be a nice dry bore, cleaned up and all that. Put a little bit of grease in your finger and get it inside of here. Real light coating just to aid with the pressing in. It's not going to affect anything. It won't make the ball joint fall out or anything. So let's put a real light coat on there, and that'll aid the press in. Now what you can do to start, get it started in here, is to tap on the bottom of it. It's not going to ruin anything. This ball joint's really tough, and that'll get seated on here so it doesn't fall out when we're trying to put the press pieces on there. Now this one has a recess right here for you to put grease in. Okay, so you see the grease fitting right here. It's going to go on here eventually. Well, that's got to line up with this recess so they can get grease guns in here in the future, something like that. So just kind of keep that in mind. Alright, now going back in, what you're going to want to do is use a C-frame press like this to press it back in, because they go in ultra tight on there. you're going to want to use something like this where there's a big receiver cup down here for the ball and stud to stick through. It'll stick through in the bottom of the C-press. Whereas up here we're going to use this flat piece, and it has, you know, maybe a half an inch or so of room inside of here for the ball joint to come up and through the arm on there. You got to make sure. And then when we're done, I'll get you in close, but you want to make sure the ball joint down here is flush with the bottom of the arm and it's fully pressed in. I'll show you that up close. And you can see the edge of the ball joint right here is flush all the way around and fully seated in the arm on here. That's the way you got to check with the good light underneath here. After that, we can start putting our boot on and everything else. Now, putting the boot back on, we're going to put a little bit of grease around the inside edge of it here, just so it slides on a little easier. And these particular boots are not indexed in any way. Use that same receiver cup you used to press in the ball joint, and you just simply put it on here and wiggle it around a little bit, and it'll snap right onto there. Just check it all the way around. Now is also a good time to put on our grease zerk fitting. Put it in the right way there. It's all backwards. Okay. And we'll get that tightened up and we'll grease it fully later once everything's together. Okay, this is where things get interesting. This upper ball joint is riveted in from the factory, and you only have to do with 3 of them instead of 4 because this one is a bolt that holds it in for the bracket here for the ABS wiring and all that. So clean the area off as best you can with a wire brush. Leave in some rust penetrant. Get these rivets exposed out of the dirt there. And we're going to get off the bolt first. I already sprayed it, so we're going to get it off there. It's 13 millimeter top and bottom. And your aftermarket ball joints come with bolts that look just like this. Bolts and nuts. So the bolt in going back together. In the meantime, we need to scrape these off. We're going to grind them through down to the arm, and then we're going to hammer them through. Now these are pretty rusted out, so they should come out pretty easy. They'll kind of disintegrate. What I use is an air chisel and try to start peeling them up on here. Like so. They're so rusted out. There you go. What you also can use is a cutoff wheel like this. Shear them off, and then we'll start driving them through. Okay, now once the heads are sheared off of here, it's nice and smooth. What you want to do is take an air hammer with an air chisel and get underneath here and just kind of start pushing it down. And also in the center of the rivets, like right here, you can see the outline of it. You want to start hitting it on there with the air hammer and push them through. Now if you're having problems getting these out of here, what you can do is heat them up, cherry red, and then pop them through with the air hammer. Also, if you don't have that, what you can do is cut them off. Get it down far enough, zing them off from underneath here, okay? And then the ball joint is free. You see it's free, still has the heads. They're stuck into the ball joint themselves. So it's out of here. Now they're all on their own. They're all alone basically. So no anything you do to them, they can't stand with their brothers, I guess you could say, and fight against you. They're all alone, and they're gonna come right out a lot easier. And once the ball joint's off of here, they're all alone. Watch this. They'll come right out. Now going back in your upper ball joint just simply bolts back in, no more rivets. And the nuts on here have a self-locking feature, a nylon self-locking feature, so we don't need no Loctite on these. Tighten all these down and get it set in place. Basically, once all 4 bolts are in here, it's aligned and we're ready to go to start tightening them all down on here. Now since we kind of ground into this to get the rivets out of there and to clean the area up and all that stuff, there's a few parts of exposed metal here. They want to paint this area just so that it's sealed up. Okay, got grease on there, and it looks like we're ready to go. Make sure all the threads are clean on here, stuff like that. Now once it's hung on here and that lower castellated nut is on there, it'll hold it, no problem, it'll handle the weight. What you want to do before fully splining the CV and the upper end is go down here and tighten it with your open end, socket, whatever, and kind of get it snugged up on the lower ball joint nut there, and then you can spline these together, okay, and then you proceed to go back up into here like this and line up the upper around here. Now it's really hard to push down. The old trick is to lift the lower arm up so the whole thing comes up with a jack, or you can use a pry bar to bring it down. Either way, it just depends how difficult it is on there. As long as you can get the bolt through there, the stud through there, and put your nut on there. You might have to jack it up. Want me to hold it? Oh, there you go. Now once you get a big bar on here, you push down, you can literally tighten the nut by hand, spin it up there, and then it's already snugging at that point, and it's going to hold. And you can visually look at it down here and go, yeah, it's holding or not. Now because it's tight in here, we're just going to tighten it by hand right now with the open end, get it snug, same through the bottom, keep snugging them up, and we can come back, we can torque them down, and then do our cotters in there. And that's how it should look on there, nice and tight, everything's snug, top and bottom, all back together. See the lower down there? And we're going to torque it, and then we'll start lining up the hole on there for the cotter pin. And you can see how should be able to see. You see the grease fitting right there? And that allows them access when they need to grease it during maintenance. Alright, we're going to torque the lower ball joint first, and then the upper. Now believe it or not, the lower ball joint calls for 84 foot-pounds, whereas the top ball joint here calls for 94 foot-pounds. So we'll torque those down now. Okay. And you can see right there how it's covering the hole in there. So we'll just tighten it. A little more. And you can see now the hole in the stud is at a window, and we can fit a cotter pin through there. We'll put the cotter pin through like so, and then you just grab it with your pliers and you bend it out of the way. Now some guys like to bend each one of these ears out a different way. I like to keep them together so there's more integrity to the cotter pin. Kind of keep them together, make it a little stronger. So you simply take it, you bend it under. And they're going to move a little bit. Something like that. Okay, putting the caliper on is the next step here. I'll make sure that the rotor is clean from any greasy fingers, stuff like that. Best we can. Make sure the guides are clean here. Alright, next step is putting the brake caliper back on. Make sure you lay your hose straight and you don't twist it. Get down through here. Start bolting it back on. And we'll get these caliper slide pins screwed back in by hand on here. There we go. You can really feel it that way. Alright, let's get our bracket in for the ABS wiring right here, and then put our bracket on top of that for the brake hose. And there's a 13mm bolt right here that goes in. We can just tighten that down. Alright, don't forget your bracket on here for the ABS. One of your ball joint bolts. And you have to kind of customize this with this bracket right here. Everything's going to be different with the aftermarket. What you want to make sure of, though, is when you go back and forth, it has enough. Just make sure you give yourself some slack. Make sure you clip in your ABS wiring up here. And using zip ties to bring it up the arm here, in case the bracket's disintegrated, stuff like that is totally fine. Just make sure nice and snug so they don't get caught on anything in the road. Okay, let's get the axle nut back on, a hub nut. And don't forget that washer I was talking about earlier. Put that on there first. Make sure the threads on here are clean, which I already did. And let's make sure the nut threads are clean also. Spray it in a rag like that. Clean the outside. Stick your finger through with the brake clean on it, like so. Front and back. And you'll get all that oil out of that from earlier. Let's get some Loctite on here, and we're going to torque it down to 165 foot-pounds. Should thread right on there like that. Get snugged up first. And then we'll torque it down. Now the trick is, same thing as taking it off. Press the brakes, have someone press the brakes, or put the screwdriver in there. Something like that so it can hold it. Torque it down. Don't forget your screwdriver, get it out of there. At this point, it's a good idea to give it a spin. Make sure you don't hear no scraping or grinding noises from the backing plate on here, because it can get bent during removal and installation. So ours sounds good. Now these ball joints, they come just with a little bit of grease inside the socket itself. What you need to do is fill them with a couple pumps. Usually smaller ones, a pump or two. Bigger ones, it might be 3-4 pumps on there. So use your grease gun, get it fully on there, and you can start filling it. Alright, one of the last things we have to put back on is the outer tie rod end here. It simply slips into the knuckle right here. So kind of pop it through like that, and I'll put our nut back on here, our castellated nut, and we'll snug it down for now. Now the torque spec on here is 35 foot-pounds, and the same thing applies. Once you have it torqued, tighten it just a little bit until that window opens up in there, and you can get your cotter pin in there so it's cotter pinned and it's taken care of and safe and secure. And this one actually lined up right away, so that was nice. Same thing, fold it over like the other ones. And then hammer it over. Alright, now once everything is back together on here, just go over everything you might have touched or taken apart on here. Just recheck it, torque it, stuff like that. Make sure you've gone over everything. You don't want the front end coming apart going on the road. The last thing we have to do is obviously put the wheel back on. So let's line it up on there, pop it on there. Always start your lug nuts on here by hand. And the torque spec on these is 140 foot-pounds. Just crisscross them so it evenly torques when it's going back down.